Let's Talk ADHD with Alex High. And today, Alex High. Yes, I can't believe we haven't done this yet. Why haven't we had you on the show yet, Alex? I don't know. But it's good to be here. I've got my Reset ADHD hockey jersey on, and I'm excited to be here. Excited for the questions you're going to ask me. I don't know what's going to happen, but let's find out. Yeah, so thank you for doing this. We've known each other for the past 31 years. It's about time we recorded one of these conversations. So, Alex, let's start off with the question I always ask my guests. What is your ADHD story? So probably the earliest story of me exhibiting ADHD traits is one that I don't even remember doing. I've just heard the story so many times from family that it's a part of my life. And yeah, so what happened was we were sitting at the table on a holiday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, one of those ones. And it was at my grandmother's house, and my grandmother had 9 kids, so all of her kids, their spouses, and their children, and my grandmother's sister were all around one big table. And I made the declaration to the entire group, sometimes I just go off to Planet Alex. Now, I don't know where I got Planet Alex from, probably from some weird 90s show that they showed us as kids, but anyway, that entire table roared with laughter, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to explain it. It was symbolic of me going into my brain, and that's a real sign of inattentive ADHD, just being inside my brain. Now, growing up through school, there were signs. I remember one time working ahead because I was so bored in class, getting called on to answer the next problem we were working on the worksheet together. And I answered the one they just did. I got in trouble for not paying attention. When really I was doing the work, I was just ahead of everyone. That same teacher wrote on my report card that I had the potential to do well in school, but that I just needed to try harder. And I think that was a message I got in school a lot, was just try harder. And I also remember things like sitting in class, looking directly at the teacher, getting instructions from the teacher on the next activity, and then everyone starting to do the thing and me going, oh crap, what are we supposed to do? So I'd have to turn to the next person and go, what'd they say? Even though I was there in the moment. So that forgetfulness, sloppy handwriting, always being told that I needed to work on my handwriting. There were signs. I remember one time going to my mom and asking her if she thought I could have ADHD, and her response was, no, your grades would be worse. At the same time, she was always telling me how smart I was and that I should be getting better grades. Now, my mom is a teacher, and she's come a long way in her understanding of ADHD, and I'm really proud of what she's doing now for her students with ADHD. But at the time, it was really frustrating to not know what was going on. I kind of got complacent and just figured I was an average student, and that was fine for me. Fast forward to college, I'm, doing the same things. I'm in school, kind of coasting through based on my intelligence and struggling to focus. And there had been a time where I was talking to a friend in downtown Sioux Falls, and we were sitting by a window, and people were walking across on Phillips Avenue. And every time somebody walked across, I'd turn my head and get distracted. And I just felt, the companion I was with didn't say anything, but I felt like I was letting him down somehow. That frustrated me, and things like that kept happening. And then one day I was in an adoration chapel because my faith is important to me. I like taking the time to pray, but I couldn't focus while praying. And it really got to me. It had been happening a lot, and it just really got to me that day, and I said to myself, what the heck is wrong with me? I gave up, left the chapel, and as I was leaving, I thought to myself, I gotta do something. I can't keep letting my lack of focus in prayer damage my self-esteem. Because that's what happens if you think your faith life is so important to you, and then you don't focus in prayer. So that got me down. And I was like, am I really that good of a Catholic? Am I really that good of a Christian? Am I really as dedicated to my faith as I say I am? At church, old ladies would come up to me and say, oh, I'm so happy you're so here and reverent and dressed up nice. And I would feel like a fraud because most of Mass I was not paying attention. That too ate at me. So the day I left the chapel and gave up on praying, I was like, I gotta do something. So I sought out a diagnosis of ADHD. I also, it's kind of funny. I sometimes go to the doctor for multiple things at once. So I discovered this thing on the bottom of my foot. I don't know what it was. So when I scheduled the appointment, I said, I got a thing on the bottom of my foot, and I think I might have ADHD. So I go to the doctor, we look at the thing on my foot, he goes, that should go away. Thankfully it did. And then I said, and I'm struggling to focus, I think I might have ADHD, is it worth testing me? And he goes, have you ever been tested for ADHD? And I said, no. And he's like, let's do it. Great doctor, but in that moment he was just like, yeah, let's get you tested. Okay. So, I go to a doctor, at least I think it was a doctor, I don't know. She did not do her job, essentially. She asked me a few questions and then was like, I don't think you have ADHD. Here's a suggestion that's not helpful that you could use in class. And the suggestion was, bring a timer with you, and every time the timer goes off, check to see if you're paying attention. Well, you can't have a timer go off every 5 minutes in class or at church or wherever you are. That's just not practical. So that didn't help. And the other thing is, she didn't even tell me the appointment was over. She just kind of sat there and waited for me to leave. Very awkward, very weird. I didn't like it. So from there, I go to a bookstore, start looking at books on ADHD, find one that says ADHD is a myth. It's not, by the way. So I kept thinking about it, and eventually I find out that doctor I went to was not in my insurance network. So I had a pretty hefty bill, and when my mom saw the bill, because it went to her house, she was like, why didn't you go to a doctor that was in your network? I was like, I don't know. I was 20 years old at the time, 19, 20. And where was I in the story? And she goes, no, you should have gone to a doctor that, A, ran tests and is in your insurance network. So there's my mom being a hero. I know earlier she seemed like an obstacle to me getting the help I needed. But like I said, she loves me. She saw the best in me. She was like, yeah, continue on with this route. So in that moment, she was cheering me on, being the support I needed. So I go to another doctor that's in my insurance network. She actually runs tests. And then there was some question of whether or not I had dysthymic disorder or ADHD. Really, I probably had both. Dysthymia is a more mild, more long-term form of depression. At the time, I was like, I don't feel depressed. But she's like, no, the psychological profile you filled out shows that you've got dysthymia. And so I was like, I don't know what's going on. A couple months go by, I finally get in to see a psychiatrist because she was just a psychologist. So the psychiatrist is going to prescribe me medication, and we discuss our options and can't find the report that the psychologist came up with. Once we find it, it says one could be causing the other, but we don't really know. And so in that moment, I was like, oh, well, I spent the last month or two thinking I was depressed when I'm not depressed. So let's treat the ADHD. And so we started a course of stimulants, and that's kind of how I got diagnosed with ADHD. But the story doesn't end there. I keep just taking medication and going about life. And life didn't really improve. It was pretty much the same. It didn't get worse. But I was on ADHD medication. Could feel a little bit different, but we were trying different things, and every once in a while I'd pull up an ADHD podcast, listen to that, maybe listen to an audiobook, but never really took major steps other than taking the medication. So I graduate college, don't know what to do with my life, so I become a freelance writer for a year. That doesn't work out. I go back to school to be a detective, find out that you have to be a regular policeman in order to be a detective. So I'm stuck in a master's criminal justice program going, well, what do I do with my life? By the end of the master's program, I decided I wanted to teach criminal behavior at the collegiate level. So after I get my master's, I think I'm going to get a doctorate. I'm going to be a substitute teacher, get some experience in the classroom. Couldn't get into a doctoral program and hated substitute teaching. So after a year of doing that, I'm like, what do I do with my life? And so heading into my second year of substitute teaching, I was like, I got to figure this out. What's going on? And when I took a hard look at myself, I realized that I wasn't managing my own ADHD well. I wasn't. So even though I stopped being a full-time freelance writer, a couple years prior, I was still writing and doing different writing projects. And so as I was looking at my life and just trying to figure out what's going on, and I made the realization that I wasn't managing my ADHD well, started doing some research on ADHD, and I was looking for a book on Catholicism and ADHD, and well, there isn't one, or there wasn't one. And when I kind of came to the conclusion that I wasn't going to find one, a voice in the back of my head said, one of your favorite authors only writes a book when there's a book he wants to read that doesn't exist. And I knew what that meant. I was like, shoot, I don't want to write this book. I want to read this book. But I was like, all right, I'll try it as an experiment. No commitment whatsoever to finishing it. And over the course of the next year, I write the book, end up self-publishing it. Catholicism and ADHD, Finding Holiness Despite Distractions. Check it out on Amazon. But while writing that book, a friend comes to me and says, hey, I think I might have ADHD, and I'm going to get tested. So I'm able to walk with him, support him as he's getting tested. I'm there to answer his questions. He ends up not getting diagnosed with ADHD, but being there for him, writing that book, awoke in me this passion for helping others with ADHD. About halfway through that year, I thought about signing up to be an ADHD coach, but chickened out. But after that experience with my friend, I was like, this is something I could do. But I was still looking for jobs, trying to figure out what I can do. I ended up getting an interview to be a proofreader at a label making company. And the closer that interview got, I was like, I really don't want to proofread labels. So I canceled the interview and signed up for ADHD coach training pretty much on the same day, I think. And that's when I started Reset ADHD. After doing a few months of training, I was like, this is the business I want to start. This is what I want to do. So I became an ADHD coach, did that for a few years. I'm still a coach, but the business lately has been focused on content, less on coaching. I'm still taking clients, so if you need a coach, check me out. I work with teens and adults who are kind of similar to me, but I've worked with people from as young as like 12, 13, all the way to senior citizens. So I'm all over the place as far as my ideal client. But, if you think, based on this video or other videos you see of me, that we'd be a good fit, reach out to me. Let's see if we can work together. But that's what I'm doing now, doing the content, doing the online courses, writing about ADHD with my blog and my books. I'm also coaching. Yeah, so that's kind of where I am right now. And I know I've been blabbering, so I'm sure you've got other questions, Alex. So, yeah, what do you think? Yeah, fascinating story. I'd love doing these interviews because you get all sorts of different stories. And, you're a writer. And as you were telling your story, you were kind of bouncing around, very much ADHD-like. But is there a through line in your story that you really feel like people need to hear? I would say that through line is self-advocacy. Because if I hadn't, reached out to a doctor, if I hadn't gone to a second doctor and gotten a second opinion, I probably would still be wondering what the heck is wrong with me. And my self-esteem would be in the toilet. And I wouldn't be anywhere in my career. So the through line is advocating for yourself. Knowing yourself, figuring out what you need, and then asking for it. That's how I would answer that question. I love that. That's something I've done in my own life. Of course you know that because you're me. Here is a question I like to ask my guests sometimes. And the question is, what's something weird or odd or unusual that you do because of your ADHD? Oh, wow, yeah. Just one? I know other guests have made that joke, but the first thing that comes to mind is my medication routine. For a while after starting to take medication, I started to notice that I couldn't remember if I had taken my medication or not. The only way to tell if you've taken your medication or not was to go about your day, see if you're distracted. By the time you figure out you're distracted, it might be too late in the day to take your medication. Or you could take your medication and risk taking a double dose and then feeling weird all day. I was like, I got to figure something out. So what I discovered is if I flip my pill bottle upside down right before I go to bed, in the morning when I take the medication, I can flip it right side up, and then I can tell whether or not I've taken my medication just by looking at the position of the bottle. And for a while, I was just taking my stimulant Since then, I've added a few more medications and supplements and stuff. And so now I'm taking like 6 pills in the morning. Technically 7, but from 6 medications. So I flip all of those upside down before bed. And then in the morning, I flip them right side up. And I can tell whether or not I've taken it just by looking at the position of the bottle. Fascinating stuff. Fascinating stuff. I like that because when we have ADHD, we need to do little tips and tricks and things to help us remember things because that memory just isn't there as well as the neurotypical brain. But if we can hack things and set up external reminders, we can remember things better. And I really like that you do that, and I really like that you share that tip because that's not the first time you've told people that tip. I really like that. Well, thank you. Thanks for saying that. You're welcome. Let's talk comorbidities. Now, you've kind of alluded to this already, kind of in your story, but you have some comorbidities, don't you? Oh, yes. I've got sleep apnea, and actually, the day we're filming this, I'm about to do a sleep study to figure out if there's anything beyond sleep apnea going on. I've also got anxiety, depression. It's hard to pinpoint when exactly my depression journey began, but if we look at kind of the story of my life, childhood wasn't easy for me. I had divorced parents, had trouble fitting in, kind of felt like the outsider growing up, and had that undiagnosed ADHD. But I never really admitted to myself that I have depression until like 2018, which was a very rough year. Got dumped twice, lost a friend to cancer, dealt with some incredible health issues, kidney issues, stomach issues, was going to doctor's appointments all the time. Again, advocating for myself because at a certain point, the doctors in where I live stopped looking into my stomach issues. And so I had to essentially reach out to the Mayo Clinic by myself to get in there. And then insurance didn't want to cover it right away. And I had to fight with them about that. I had to fight with my local doctors to get them to... so it was just a rough year in 2018. And in October, or late October, I had an emergency mental health evaluation. I'll let you fill in the blanks there. And that's when I started medication for depression and anxiety. Took a long time to find an antidepressant that helps me. Luckily, I'm on a good one now. Still, depression and anxiety can rear their ugly heads if something doesn't go the way I expect it to or want it to. And that's really the most frustrating part is... it doesn't take much for my mood to tank. Thankfully, I've got coping strategies that keep me here and help me find what I need to keep going. So that's kind of my mental health story in a nutshell. It's very important when you have ADHD to take care of your mental health because self-esteem issues can crop up, especially if you're a later diagnosis. Be kind to yourself. Know that you're doing the best you can. And when you need help, reach out. Oh, absolutely. It's crucial to reach out when you're struggling. And thankfully, the suicide hotline here in the United States has been simplified. It's now 988. So if you need help, please call that number. I believe you can also text it too. So just know that there's help out there. You're not alone. ADHD is enough of a struggle, but when you throw depression on top of it, it gets worse. So I appreciate you, Alex, for sharing your story and really letting our viewers know what can happen alongside of ADHD. And there's more than just depression and anxiety that go along with ADHD. Like you mentioned, sleep disorder, all sorts of different things. I call them unwanted tag-alongs. Thank you for sharing that, Alex. Well, you're welcome. And I just feel like it's important to talk about mental health. We're filming this the day after Mental Health Awareness Day. It's funny, like once I admitted that I needed help, I became more vocal about mental health stuff. I was already a little vocal, but I guess I was just in denial that I was the one who needed help. I thought, I struggled a little bit when I was in like 5th grade, but I'm fine now. I wasn't fine. I'm in a good place now, mostly. Still trying to figure out, all the different aspects of my mental health and my physical health and how that affects my mental health. So it's a journey, and like I said, reach out if you need help. Or I think you said that, but you're me, so It doesn't matter which one of us said it. I'm just glad it was said. You've asked this question of at least 2 of your guests, but favorite superhero? Well, that's kind of out of nowhere. But Batman, obviously. Obviously. What is it about Batman that draws you in? You know, it's funny you ask that, because I feel like it's related to some of the stuff we were just talking about. You know, I've been a fan of Batman since before I can remember things, so I don't know where my love of Batman started, but I do remember this specific moment where it was cemented. It was when I learned for the first time Batman's origin story, how his parents were killed, and he made a vow to make sure that no one had to suffer through that like he did. And so he vowed to take on the crime of Gotham and make Gotham a better place. And when I read that, or heard it, or whatever, forget exactly how it came into my memory, I was like, that's me. Right? I had this ideal version of a family, and that was shattered when my parents divorced. Luckily, my parents are still alive. They weren't killed, so I don't have to suffer the way Batman suffered. But that idea of like something tragic happened to me as a child that I didn't ask for, that I didn't deserve, but I'm not defined by that. I can take that and do good because of that. So, you know, I made a vow that night that I wouldn't let my children suffer the way I did. Now, I'm not married yet. I don't have kids. I know that I struggled a lot because of my parents' divorce. But I can bring about good in that awfulness. And I think this applies to ADHD as well. Because when you're struggling, when you've got something you didn't ask for that's bothering you or causing you pain, like ADHD, that there's pain and social rejection and all that stuff that comes along with ADHD that makes life hard. You don't have to wallow in that awfulness. You can bring about good. So if there's anything I want to leave our audience with, is that ADHD doesn't define you. It doesn't have to be the tragedy of your life. Yes, it can suck at times, but because you have ADHD, you have an opportunity to bring about good. So go out there and bring about good. Wow, I couldn't have put it any better myself, and I am myself. So, and you are myself. Yeah, I think we should leave it there. Great place to end. Alex, where can people find you if they want more Alex? Well, I think they've gotten enough Alex in this interview, but my business is on all the social medias. Reach out to me at Reset ADHD. Go to resetadhd.com. Those are the 2 places to find me on social media and the internet. Once again, resetadhd.com, at resetadhd, and all the social medias. Alex, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. Oh yeah, thanks for having me. This was great. And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.